fireside chat about comedy. Today we're going to talk about the different eras of comedy. We're going to start with the Greeks and go all the way to today with stand-up comedy. We're going to analyze what they were about, what they were focused on, and how they changed over time. Now we're going to start with the Greeks and Jack.
So, Greek comedy was pretty much based on improbable plots that didn't really make any sense, but were still really funny. The people were dressed up in odd outfits and masks to enhance their character. Most of these comedies were satirical comedies making fun of politics and society. The mastermind of all this name was Aristophanes, and his comedy can still be seen today in shows like The Colbert Report and sitcoms.
Thanks, Jack. Now on to Roman comedy. Back to you.
Thanks, Will. So Roman comedy, unlike Greek comedy, was solely for entertainment purpose, and not really to answer any big question about politics or society. Believe it or not, mimes were really important back then, and were really funny. They portrayed different social classes and stereotypes, like the bragging father or the greedy soldier, and different social classes, like higher, medium, or lower. They also used features like acrobatics, greed, and dancing to enhance their character values. This kind of pantomiming can be seen today in children's musicals and plays, when kids are cast as inanimate objects like bushes and trees.
Shakespearean comedy.
Now, Shakespearean comedy occurred during the English Renaissance. The English Renaissance was around the 1500s, and William Shakespeare wrote several comedic plays. Now, he used several new features, even though his comedies imitated Roman comedies. He uses an intertwined plot with a lot of puns and wordplay, which were funny back then, but are kind of seen as lame now. He used double entendres and innuendos to make a witty side character that acted as comedic relief even during the dreariest parts of the play. Now, these plays were often precursors to romantic comedies of today, where there's a witty side character, there's a separation and a reunification, and all that comes from Shakespearean
And now
comedies.
for some burlesque comedy with Will.
Burlesque comedy, activate!
Yeah, so burlesque comedy was during the 1800s. Now, what it was pretty much parodies. What they did is they took a mainstream play or opera, and then they added comedy to it, and they added women in the male roles. Now, while this kind of seems stupid today, it was seen as very funny back then. They take a female actress and then put her in a male role, and that would be funny somehow. And so, well, they also kind of made it part theater, part kind of strip show, which was kind of odd, but was seen immensely funny and good to the middle class. And the middle class enjoyed these because they would know what the mainstream operas and plays were, but they'd also enjoy the parodies almost even more. This can kind of be seen like in parody movies today, like maybe Borat or something like Date Movie, kind of those lame movies, but they still relate to popular culture.
Well, we were.
Yes, so these burlesque comedies were pretty funny because they took some mainstream stuff, added some girls and comedy to it, and then redistributed it to the middle class.
Will with,
The big burning comedy now.
or just satirical humor.
Yeah. Okay, so satirical comedy is the use of common sense, reason, logic, or just humor to kind of break down someone's vice or just someone personally or some sort of social taboo. Now, Twain uses this throughout Huck Finn, and he uses it in many different forms to kind of break down several things. First, he uses it to break down slavery and Christians and how they're really hypocrites for saying that everyone's equal but yet still have slaves. Then he also uses it to break down kind of like the romantic drama of like Romeo and Juliet, or those kind of Shakespearean dramatic plays where there's these family feuds and there's this whole issue of family honor. Now, this can totally be seen with the Sheppertons and the Grangerfords when there's a whole gunfight and it's completely needless violence for family honor and kind of some hypocritical parts in the novel where the Grangerfords said they don't know why they're fighting. Now, the last part that Twain uses satirical comedy for is when Jim is in captivity and Tom and Huck think of all these elaborate ways to get him out of jail. And so this can be seen as childhood innocence, but Twain uses it to see as kind of the underlying racism of a lot of people along the Mississippi River. Tom thinks it's just fun to mess with Jim when he's being held captive at the Phelps' farm. And he says that he's too stupid because he's a runaway slave and because he's African American to really understand what they're doing and that it doesn't really matter. And that's satirical comedy, as Twain puts it.
Or Jim.
Or as we put it,
Yeah.
Cut. Money.
Now we've got absurd comedy with Hunter.
Absurd comedy is usually about a character that's an everyday guy that's put into either repetitive or awkward situations by luck or another higher power. Some examples of absurd comedy are The Three Stooges and like Pies in the Face and stuff like that. Usually the stuff that usually the situations the character put in are everyday situations that turn out completely wacky and silly, like The Three Stooges. Usually they are making fun of a mainstream, something that's successful in the mainstream, and normally people don't like to be in the mainstream, or don't like things that are in the mainstream. And absurd comedy was really popular in the 40s and 50s, but then it sort of grew out and didn't go with the history of comedy, just sort of that time period.
Now to Hunter with stand-up comedy.
Stand-up comedy is a type of comedy where a comedian performs live in front of an audience. Stand-up comedy involves everyday things that you wouldn't find funny, but when a comedian says it, it's hilarious. Usually stand-up comedy is performed in clubs, bars, or colleges, but it's not limited to that. People that have influenced stand-up comedy are Richard Pryor, George Carlin, Chris Rock, and even newer people like Dave
Mencia. He's funny.
And even newer people like Dave Chappelle. Stand-up comedy uses short comedic stories called bits, and usually stand-up comedy doesn't last very long, but sometimes it can go on. Yeah.
That's a wrap. Okay, cool.
Is that better?
What's the difference between a Cadillac and a golf ball? Tiger Woods can drive one.
Your joke, Jack?
I can only think of really offensive ones.
I want to do because it's fun. It's fun to do bad things. To drive into a car.
But did you know that you could perhaps kill somebody?
Yes, but I wanted to do hood rat stuff with my friends.